Okay, now, so for the implementation of the app to work, for us to be able to deposit, to make withdrawals, to transfer, we have to use JavaScript, and also to implement the login functionality that is in our uh other one that is actually working. So we need to implement this login functionality and so many other things. So with that much talk, let's go into the coding process. So let's start. Okay, so we need to now be able to get all these IDs in which we've given to our um our HTML tags. Okay, so now we need to add a new file saying index.js. You can name it anything you want to call it. Okay, we'll be making use of functions for this project. We're using a lot of functions. So a function is just like a factory. So the function takes in parameters to process. It's like a food factory. Now, raw ingredients go into the machine and the finished products come out beautiful for consumption. That is what function is like into the machine that does the entire processing and gives you the finished result. So we will use function in getting raw data and giving us a finished result which we can understand. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a JavaScript list, and this list is going to contain the list of the users. So let's go. This list is called list in Python, but it's called arrays in JavaScript. So don't let me confuse you. So we're going to create a Python and a JavaScript array. Okay, so let's go. So we're going to say const users to be equal to, this is the array, and inside the array we want to have an object. Okay, so each user is an object in the array. So what do we need? We need the username, and we need the password. But for now, let's get to the username. Username will be user1. Depending on you, you can have normal names. Okay, so the username is this, the password is this. Okay, and we're going to have the account number, and I'm just going to put in some things. 6. Okay, so that's an object. Whenever you place in um okay, let's just finish up. Now we need the account balance. Now we have to set it to this. Okay, so let's make it a floating type number. That is a number that is not a whole number, it's a float. A number that is whole is an integer, such as this number. Then this is a floating type number. Okay, so when we save, this becomes our first user. Now we're going to have 3 more. You can have 4, 5 more, but I'm just going to have 3 more. So I forgot to add this. So you can have as much as you like. Then I'm going to call this user 2, user 3, 3. Okay, I'm going to change this to 4, 5. Okay, so each user has its own unique account number and details. So I'm going to show you how I could generate this using JavaScript later on, but for now, let's go with hard-coded values. So if we save this now, it's not going to have any effect with our main page here. So we have to implement that. So next up is to allow the user to be able to allow the computer to save the information of the user, like we've seen before, where we can access the information of the user, and when we reload the page, it doesn't get reloaded and it remains the same. So even you coming back to log in, it's always available. So we're making use of the computer's local storage. Okay, so first of all, we have to create an instance. Say let the current user. So the current user refers to the person that is currently logged in. So for now, it should just be equal to null, which is there's no current user. Okay. So now we have to check if the current user is already logged in. So let's just leave a comment right here. So check if the current user is already logged in. Okay. So to do that, we'll have to use the computer's local storage. So let's say const stored user oops equals now there's a method in JavaScript that we call JSON, and just add dot pass to the front. So if you haven't heard about JSON is a form of data like this. JSON can be as bigger than this. I could have objects and objects. Maybe for username, I could have another one that says link user one. Sorry, user one email user one blah 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 blah. So this is a JSON. Okay, so no matter how the JSON is, a JSON can contain so many files, so many data. So now we are passing this JSON. We're going to pass this JSON through into our local storage. Okay, so we're taking this JSON now into our local storage. How are we going to do it? We're going to pass it. That's the meaning of the pass here, into local storage. Okay, then dot get item dot get item, and we're going to pass in the current user. So what are we doing here? We're checking if the current user is already logged in. Now the current user is set to null. Now if I log in as user one and it's already saved into the local storage, I'll have to check when I reload, if when I click on the reload button, if user one is currently logged in, then it's not going to render this page for me anymore. So I'm just implementing this now so I won't forget. So it's not going to render to me this page anymore. So by the time I reload the page, I'm still going to have the user one that's originally logged in. So don't worry, when we finish with the JS, I'm going to give you a detailed explanation on this. Okay, so we are now going to check if the stored user is the one that is logged in, then we're going to display the UI of this account summary and the rest. So now let's just go. We'll keep understanding. So if the stored user, which is this, the user that is stored in the local storage is saved as the stored user. So if it's the one that is here, then we want to do this. We want to say the current user is equal to the stored user. Okay, so now this is no longer null, but it's now the stored user that is coming from the local storage. Okay, so it becomes the current user. which means he gets all his details, all his information, his banking account number, his balance, his deposits, his transaction histories, and all that stuff. Then I'm going to have to implement a method that says show UI, or we can say display. No, let's just use show logged in UI. Okay, so this is the method. Oops. Logged in UI. This is the method we're going to implement right now. So first of all, before we do that, we have to set the display of this to none, display of this to none, and the display of this to none. So we'll go back to our index.html, and when we have account summary, then we have to set an ID of account summary. Oops. Then we have to set a class, sorry, a style, display set to none. Okay, display set to none, and you see it's gone. Okay, now we'll do the same for transaction history. Let's just copy this and transaction history. Then we can do it right here. Take this off, display none. Okay, now we can also do it right here, transaction form. Take this one, oops. Okay, let's just type it at ID transaction form, then style display none. Okay, so now we have just the login for now. So the show user UI would come in later on. Okay, so now we could say show, we could now say show logged in UI. So we can say function show logged. I'll just copy this. Sure, I'm very lazy at typing, so sorry about that. So show user logged in UI. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use JavaScript to set back this to none. That's vanilla JS. So now we're going to access this file, this form. Where is it? Okay, this form. I'm going to use this ID form section, logged in form section, and we're going to set it to the display of none. So let's go back to our JS. Now we use vanilla JS in accessing this document.get element by ID, get element by ID, and this is the ID. Then we have to say dot style dot display. So now we have to set it to equal none. Okay, so when the user logs in, it becomes equal to none. Now let's go. Sorry, I have to put this. Okay, the next is we're going to display the account summary we set to none before, which is this one. And what is the the ID is account summary. So I'm going to display it back to block. So to get something to display, we can use block or inline. I think I have a video on that. I'm going to link it also, so you know the difference between block an inline element. So I'm going to style it and give it a display of block. Okay, now we're going to the third one, which is for the transaction history and the transaction form. So you could take it as a challenge. So you just pause the video now and get the other ones highlighted. So if you couldn't do it, there's no problem. It's just a syntax. The document here refers to your DOM, which is, every HTML element is part of a document. So in the document, we're getting the element by ID. The ID is what is here. This part in which we labeled ID equals account summary. So now we're getting it from our document, and we're saying for the style, which is the same style we added here to display none, we're setting it back here to the display of block, which means it should be displayed on screen after the user logs in. Okay, so we have to get the validation so that when we call in the um the button, which is the login button from here, yes, this one, we have to give it some on click, and we need to get the function first before we give on click. And secondly, okay, it's already here, so we need to get the function for our on click. So what function are we going to use for that? We're going to use the login function, but I'm just going to call it fake login. Okay, so let's just give it here because it's not really an original login, so I'm just going to call it fake login. Okay, so that's just the name because it's not really a login, so it's just a make-believe login. Okay, so now we're going to check the value of the username and password imputed in the fields called username and password. Here again, we're going to make use of IDs. Okay, so I need you to follow along in case you don't understand. So we're going to make use of this ID here of password and ID of username to get the values in this form. So now let's go. Let's put it above this show. So let's say function fake log in. Okay, I think I spelled it the same. Okay, log in. So if you spell it wrong, it's not going to work for you. That's just the basic truth and in programming. Okay, so now let's assess the first one, which is const username, and we can call it equals document dot get element by ID, and what we're going to pick is the ID. I think that should be username. Okay, let's not think, let's just check it. And yeah, username next is password. So we're going to get the value. Okay, I'm going to get the value of it. So just type value. Okay, so that is the first one we just highlighted. So I need you to take as a challenge the second one, if you can highlight it just like this. Okay, so pause the video now. So if you could do it, it's good. If you can't do it, it's also fine. Okay, so now let's just take in the next one, which is the password. Okay, so the more you code, the better you get. Document dot get element by ID, and we're going to access password. Okay, remember we copied the ID name before, and we're going to have the value. Those are the two things we need. Now, for the validation, we have to compare if the password and the username is equal to our JSON data above. It's the same thing if you're using a database. So all you have to do when logging in, we just have to check for the username and the password if it matches. Now, this is the difference. In a database, you're not going to store your password plainly like this. It's not allowed. And if by chance your database gets breached, everyone's data is going to leak, and that is not really nice and secure if it involves something like catch or even data about someone's credit card information. So it's not really safe. Now, you could store it using some encrypted way of storing password, such as using bcrypt or using this encoding of passwords, but not for now. We're going to go into that when we're using a MongoDB as backend. Okay, so we have to secure this. For now, we're keeping everything plain and simple. So the password is just going to be like that. So now we're going to compare if the password, the username and the password inputted here is the same as the ones imputed in our database. So without any further talk, let us go straight into it. So now we're going to compare. First of all, we're going to find. Let me show you what I mean by find. So I'm going to say const user is equal to users dot find. So what are we doing here? Well, we're just going to find if the user that was inputted, the details inputted in our input fields, we're going to use it to find it from our JSON if the username and the password are the same. So this find method, we can have a parameter. It takes in a callback function. So I'm just going to call it u, and you can call it anything you want. I'm just going to call it u, which is for the user. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to use this u to check u.username, which is this u now is coming from this, the value of this database. So we're going to check if it is equal to this u, sorry, is coming from our JSON, the user. So we're using it in comparison to the username from our listen DOM. So we're going to get it from there. Then we could say and the u dot password, it is equal to the password from our DOM. Okay, so why do we need to find? There are 3 users in the database. Okay, let me use this. There are 3 users in our database. Now these 3 users, they have their own username, they have their own password. So we have to check these usernames, which is this. We have to find. Now the find, if I put in user 1 here and I click on it, it's going to find user 1. Okay, I've seen it. So since you've seen user 1, it's going to check now if the user is equal to the username is equal to the username that is stored here, and the password I imputed, which is password 1, is equal to password 1 that is here. And when I log in, it checks for that, and if it's not correct, if it is not correct, it's not going to do anything for now. I think I haven't saved. Okay, so remember to save. If not, it's not going to do anything for you. All right, so user 1, password 1. Okay, so okay, I know I haven't called the show logged in UI for now. So it's going to find if this value and this value is equal to the value on the database. So once again, it's going to check, the find is going to check from the users in which you imputed which is this users, is going to check the from users, this list of which this array of users is going to check, this is find, and is going to find from the user here if it's equal to the one imputed here, and the password here is equal to the password imputed there. So if you still find it confusing, later on we're going to discuss more about that. All right, so now after checking that, we're just going to move our function into our user function. I'm going to say if user, user, then we have to say current user is equal to user. So we're just checking if the user available from here matches the one here. Then if it is correct, which is this user, then we have to set this user to the current user, which is this that is initially null, in order to have it saved in our database and sorry, in our local storage. Okay, so now not only that, we have to create a storage for this item. So we're just going to say local storage dot store. Before the store user, before we used local storage dot get item, but now we're going to set item. So before we got an item from it, that's to check if the user already exists in our local storage. Then now we're going to set this one into our local storage to save it up. Then we're going to pass in the current user and stringify it. Okay, so now let's go passing in the current user, and we're going to do json.stringify. And what this does is that it converts a JavaScript value to a JavaScript object notation, which is JSON. So your JSON is the object notation, and that's what I showed you earlier. The JSON is just a JavaScript object notation, which is this. Okay, so it's made up of objects. So now we're stringifying this data that we're checking if it's correct, was turning it into an object that's going to be stored in our computer system, and we're just going to pass in the current user, which is why we did this. The user should be equal to the current user, and at the end we're going to store it in our database, which we are also going to pull out when we are about to log in again, maybe after I reload. Now we have to say show logged in UI, and else we have to catch if it doesn't work. So else we see alert, and we can see invalid credentials, please try again. Okay, so when you get this, you just know you have the wrong credentials, and you have to input it again. Okay, so let's try. We have the first user is user1, and the password is password1. So let's try it. Okay, so please make sure you have the correct name of your file below where you have the script. Okay, script link. So now if you just put in your user and your password, then you find out that you get the UI. So now the login form disappears automatically, and you get a nice UI for the user input and other stuffs. So for this, we're just going to log out the user, and Let's do that immediately. So we're going to have function logout. Okay, so what are we going to do for the logout? Well, we're just going to implement a few things. First of all, we're going to remove the user from the local storage. Second of all, we're going to remove I'm going to set current user back to null, and we're going to have to display everything back to the way they are before. So let's do it now. You should be able to implement this as a challenge. Now for the logout, we just have to set, okay, so for the logout, we have to set this user, okay, so we have to set the display form to block, the user, sorry, the account summary to none, this to none, and this to none, which is transaction history. So this does not show, this does not show, and this does not show, but instead we have this our form displayed back. So immediately we click on the logout. Then also we have to set this current user, because we set the current user in here to the user, we have to reset it to none, so we can say current user should be equal to null. Okay, so in the case there's no current user, so just do this. After setting all these ones back to none, the ones that are to be known, the ones that are to be blocked, then you can come back to this video. So pause the video now and do that. So after doing that, we'll end up with something like this. Okay, so first of all, we have to go back to our local storage. Since we set the item, we have to remove the item, which is current user. Okay, so now after setting current user to null, that is where it comes with this stuff. Then we have to get the form feed values, which is the username, the password, the amount, and the receiver. We have to set them up to empty. For now, we won't see this two because we haven't implemented our form for transfer. So we just have to set the username, which is this, and the password to empty values. Okay, so if you don't set them to empty, you will still get your pre-logged in information here, which is not really nice because anybody can just log in. So we have to set them back to empty, and now we have to link it to our login, our logout button, which is in somewhere here. Okay, yes, here, and we have to give it a, we have to give it an on click value of logout. Okay, let's save. User one, password one. Okay, logout, fine. So it's working perfectly fine. Now we have to get in the other part of the form, which is for making a transfer.